All right, and good afternoon, everyone. Spin Ventures here, live from Fort Caroline, Tamunican, Tamunic, Tamucuan Visitor Center. Yes, we are at another state park. Yes, we are at another historical site where the fort of Fort Caroline is. And so, did not think I would be doing another historical site, but when I found out it was along my route to Fort Clinch that I saw the sign for Fort Caroline, and I didn't think it was possible to hit up two forts in one day, but here we are at Fort Caroline. You can see the cannon behind me along with the visitor center. We're going to take a look around at another Florida state park that is going to be checked off our map today along with the National Park Service. So, not just a Florida state park, it is a national state park. So let's go ahead and... Alright, so we'll go through the museum here in a minute. The lady, one of the rangers, is already doing a tour with another family. So we're going to go ahead and head towards the fort. I just recently found another fort that's literally 20 minutes away from here. So we're going to go to that fort as well. It's called Yellow Bluff Fort Park. Yellow Bluff Fort Park. And, but right now we are going to take this path down the hill. As you can see, down the hill to the fort. And we will look for, actually we're going to go down this way first because there is something to read on a historical mark. And we are just, we're about 20 minutes away from downtown Jacksonville. So we'll eventually make it to Everbank Stadium. Right now it's looking good. The weather has cooperated. Thank you to him. But here, the River of May. So we have the Spanish and the French. All right, the French found their site on the settlement. So we get started here. Having landed on the River of May shore, we saw the chief of that country. He showed such enthusiasm that he almost lost his composure. Came up to us repeating, "Friend, friend." That was Captain Rene de Londour of 1564. Captain Rene de Londonier, on June 22nd of 1564, arrived in New France with his 3 ships, some 200 French Protestant noblemen, soldiers, and artisans, landing along the River of May, or we are on the St. Johns River. This is the St. Johns River, which runs right into downtown Jacksonville. Like I said, we're not very far from downtown. But the adventurous men and women brought their fears, hopes, and dreams. Would they survive in this strange land? We will see. Discover the riches they imagined. The colonists were hopeful. The French found a site for their settlement on June 30th, protected by a bluff commanding a river view. The spot offered fertile land, potable water, woodland fruits, and building materials, and an abundance of fish. The French soldiers thought the ground defensible, and its closeness to the sea afforded access for ships. Above all, the Timucuan natives seemed friendly and willing to help them in their new world. Welcome, friend. As we head along the French Memorial Trail, we are here. We got to go past the boat dock, and that's where we're going to end up. The community oven exhibit and fort in the fort. This 0.5-mile French Memorial Trail leads to a large-scale exhibit of Fort Caroline, memorial to the first planned French colony established in what is now the United States. 1564, France built a fort and village somewhere near here as it was beginning to challenge Spain, the world's leading power, for the resources of the New World. All but a few of the 300 settlers at La Caroline were Huguenots, Protestants fleeing persecution by the Catholics and in France, and seeking freedom to worship in this New World land. The hopes and dreams of all the colonists were tragically short-lived. Shape of the triangular fort exhibit at the end of the trail is based primarily on a map by expedition member Jacques Le Mayon. This large-scale exhibit was built in 1964. The trail offers a generally firm surface and follows a gentle incline. Let's head to the fort. Of course, along this route, there are always signs that point you in towards the direction. But this one, it was about the Timucuan chiefs. Secharabia's men crafted a shelter similar to the one seen here. So Secharibia could sit and watch the colonists build their settlement. When the French requested help, Secharibia sent 80 of his strongest men. Natives helped dig the fort's moat. They gathered palmetto leaves, weaving a thatch to cover the colonists' houses. The Timucuans gave of their bounty gold and silver, jewelry, pearls, animal hides, and medicine plants. In return, Chief Secharibia sought a war alliance to help his people. When the alliance never materialized, Timucuan assistance dwindled. So there's the fort. We're about to go into it, but first, talking about building La Caroline. Measuring a piece of ground in the shape of a triangle, colonists laid out their fort and settlement using shovels, cutting hooks, hatchets. They cleared the site of trees. The fort and storage barns were erected quickly, with other buildings soon to follow. The first guardhouse, built in the center of the fort, stood too high and was blown over by fierce winds, the eye of the hurricane, and baking ovens were placed outside to keep the fort to keep fire away from the fort's powder magazine. Once the common buildings were completed, the colonists set to work building their homes. As we head up towards the fort, we're going to go in this shaded area as it talks about some of the wood stoves. That's a wood stove or a stone oven, and building a village in the wilderness like this. Joy was in the air. After 7 French ships arrived with fresh supplies and men, women, and children in August of 1565, the colonists went to work completing their village outside the fort. Men sawed logs into timbers, framed houses, and thatched roofs. Women roasted pigs and goats, made stews, baked bread, wove, clothed, and cared for the children. Little did the colonists know, however, that troubles and tragedy were brewing. Behold, the gateway to Fort La Caroline. As we enter the fort through the big wooden gates. Here we are. This was the fort. Right here. There's the cannons. Here, this is the main area. And, okay, so right away, there was a bloody massacre that took place here at Fort Caroline. At the break of dawn on September 20th of 1565, about 400 Spanish troops under Pedro Menendez de Avilés, we learned about him back in St. Augustine, stormed the sparsely defended fort and massacred 130 people. About 70 colonists fled into the woods or to ships anchored in the river. Those survivors who made it to the ships headed back to France. On September 23rd, Menendez left most of his soldiers behind to hold the fort, and with only 50 men rushed back to defend his newly settled colony, St. Augustine. So this one's about death, survival, and revenge. The Spaniards were not done with the French after the massacre at La Caroline. Pedro Menendez tracked down 2 separate groups of starving shipwrecked French soldiers at an inlet south of St. Augustine. Menendez ordered his troops to kill nearly all of them, including Jean Rabot, but spared 30 who were Catholic, craftsmen, or musicians. The inlet became known as Matanza, Spanish for slaughters. 3 weeks later, Menendez encountered a large group of shipwrecked French soldiers near Cape Canaveral. Of this lot, all lives were spared at Cape Canaveral. So Matanza means slaughters. Remind me of that one. So here's the fort itself. I'll just kind of do an aerial shot. It's definitely not as big as where we were earlier today at Fort Clinch, but this was one of the forts that the French built and had a small village here at Fort Caroline. This is Fort Caroline. And we'll go over to the cannons here in a second, but first we want to commemorate America's French heritage. Like Amiens de Antiquity, de Arlec, Martin, Louise, Nicholas, Barthélemy, Miguel, Thomas, Ballot, Etienne, Sieur de la Blonderie, Bontemps, Burdett, Francos la Calil, Nicholas, Jean Cossette, Niguisier de la Crête, La Croix, Jean Dudin, Double, Dronette, Jean Dubois, Jackie Dulac, Francis Eustach Fayette, Martin Fournier, Jean Pierre Laguille, Estene Genevieve Lejeune or de Geveur, Estene Michael Gunner, Captain Lagrange, Sieur de Grandpere, Gros de Groutot, Hanks, Jean des Hayes, Francisco Jean, Rene Guadalin de Londonier, Jean-Lucas de Les Machiaville, Captain Mallard, Nicholas Pierre de Marglac, Martin Michelin, Robert Jehan Lemajor, Jacques Leméon de Margus, de Otegli, Albert Ela de Promprere, Giles de Presachir, Pierre, Jacques, Jean, Mitre, Robert Le Roche Ferrier, Stefano de Rajomont, La Roque, Rousey de Sinclair, Captain Sainte Marie, Jackie Sale, Vincent Simon, Bertrand Sunferent, Titus, Jackie's Toth, Trinchat, Pierre L. Delouy, Captain Vallard Velotte, Michael Le Visser and Thomas de Le Visser, Nicholas de La Virgin, Visti, and Yonville. Okay, if I pronounce any of those names wrong, I apologize. I probably did. But these are commemorating America's French heritage. The list of names who all contributed here at Fort Caroline National Memorial who created the French Huguenot settlement here in 1565. Except for the colony's leaders, little or nothing is known about most of the colonists and what happened to them. What is known comes from brief entries and historic documents and records. Alright, so a tidbit here, a shred there. La Caroline's tale is full of unknowns. Historic maps and engraving provide clues about the size, shape, and location of the fort, but nothing definitive has been found in the ground. Who were the African colonists mentioned briefly by one of the Frenchmen? Where did the Spanish camp just before the massacre? And why did Jean Rabout's son, Jackie, first fire his ship's cannon at the Spaniards? Questions go on and on. But this fanciful 1673 engraving of La Caroline by a European artist who likely never set foot in Florida adds mountains to the landscape, probably exaggerates the complexity and location of the buildings. This view may depict the arrival of Jean Rabout's fleet in 1565. Alright, so that was Fort Caroline, made by the French settlements and in 1564. And then, of course, as we're reading on the plaque earlier, that Captain Menendez, came here while he had other men in St. Augustine, where he first settled in 1565 on September 4th. But before that, there was the Spaniards, the French here. The French built this fort for their Native American friends. And their friends, the Native Americans, helped them provide the supplies and resources they needed to build the fort. And so that's how the French and the Native Americans became good friends. Now, head back up the hill into the visitor center, and we'll move on to our next park. And we will at Yellow Bluff Fort, which is only about 20 minutes from here, and it's still in Jacksonville, around the Jacksonville area. So, thank you all for watching on this this spin venture, short little spin venture off the side road, out of course, I don't know where. And I love coming to places like this, just hole in the wall, just reading signs, really. And but yeah, thank you all for watching, and we will see you all at Fort Yellow Bluff shortly.